you guys a math video. So here we are. Decimals. You know what? When I said that fractions are the hardest, I really did mean that. But probably second to that can be decimals, and only because of the way that it's often taught, not because they're all that much harder than fractions. In fact, decimals, I got news for you. I've got a secret. What is a decimal? Decimal is a fraction. Watch. So here's your number line. Yes, number lines are our friends sometimes. And there is our number line with fractions. Notice that I've got these written as tenths. There's a reason for that, because I'm going to go to decimals. There's going to be an assumption that you make here early on, and I'm going to say just don't make that assumption. Right now, make no assumptions. Just kind of watch what goes on, let it play itself out, and then hopefully it'll be a easier thing to understand when we get to the end. So, what's a decimal? Well, a decimal really is just another way to write a fraction. In fact, decimals are fractions. And no, I'm not making that up. I'm not stretching the truth, nothing like that. They are just that same value expressed in a different form. So let me take you a step back. So let's say, for example, I can express the number 1 as 10/10. Those are two different forms. One's fraction form, the other is standard form whole number, right? Okay, so two different forms there. That's all we're talking about here today, is decimal form versus fraction form. So I'm going to show you how and why, and you're going to like it. I promise. So what I did was I took my original divisions that I borrowed from my fancy little number line up top. Now, this is not meant to look the same necessarily in size as the number line, but it does represent 1. So that rectangle you see there, that is 1 today. And then what I did was I went ahead and shaded in 3 parts of that. Since that whole is divided into 10 equal parts, I've shaded a total of 3 out of those 10, or 3/10. That is a fraction. And yes, I have 10, and that should say 10/10, and now it does. And so now I'm going to show you what the decimals look like. And this is just the beginning of this lesson, so don't say, oh, okay, got this. The worst thing you can do here is memorize this. I know, I'm saying that out loud. If you memorize this and don't really understand what it means, then going forward, it's going to make it more difficult for you. So just sit back, relax, and everyone take this in. It's going to be fine. So I've got another way of counting, and this, believe it or not, is standard form. These are standard decimal form, but this is still standard form. So 1/10 the fraction is the same as 1/10 the decimal, and 2/10 and 3/10 and so on and so forth until you get down to 1 whole, right? Or up to 1 whole. Notice, tenths are fractions that are less than 1 whole. So in each of those examples, the 1/10, the 2/10, the 3/10, and so on, those are all fractions less than 1. When I get to 10/10, I'm going to represent that, excuse me, I'm going to represent that using a whole number. And you're saying, Mr. C, but you put a 0 next to a thing I think is a decimal point. I'll explain more about that later. But for now, just leave it as it is and don't think too deeply about that. All I want you to think about is what you see here in the similarity between those values. Okay? So, bottom line, and I know it's got the Docere desktop trial written over the top of it. So, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to, well, I can't eliminate that. So, anyway. So, 3/10 is the same as 3/10. That's the point I'm making. I will continue to elaborate on that concept. I've got 3 more slides to do it. Yes, you'll love it. So, example. 1/10 of $1 is 1/10, also known as 10 cents. Yes, that is the way you write it with the dollar symbol. I know there's a lot of confusion about that. You guys were taught how to do this when you were much younger, and you never wrote it like this. You wrote it as 10 cents. I'm here to tell you the 10 with the little c with the line cross out in it has led to more confusion about decimals than any single thing that I've ever encountered in math. I know. It's how we express things. It's how we use symbols to represent words. And sometimes it works and sometimes it backfires. It's called an unintended consequence. So 1/10 of 1 whole is equal to 1/10. I know, right? Yes, you just said the same words twice. It's true. But I want you to get the association between the fraction and the decimal representation of that same value, 1/10. So let's carry this forward. 2/10 of 1 whole is the same as 2/10. 3/10 of 1 whole is the same as 3/10. I think you're seeing the pattern here. 4/10 of 1 whole is 4/10. You write it just like that. I'm going to break this down for you right now. There is a pattern, true. A tenth is one place value to the right of the decimal point. Mr. C, what's the decimal point? I'm so glad you asked. The decimal point is a symbol we use to separate whole numbers from fractions. That's what it is. That's what it means. You could go a step further and say, okay, Mr. C, then everything to the right of the decimal point is always a fraction, and I would say you are absolutely correct. Move to the head of the class, or at least somewhere in the middle where I can see you. Yes, and quit fidgeting. Anyway, so the idea to get from this slide is that the fraction 2/10 or 3/10 or 4/10 has its corresponding, that means linked to, that means you can draw a line from one to the other, corresponding decimal notation. That's the word I'm looking for. In other words, that's the way you write it. So you have 2/10 is written like this as a fraction, and 2/10 to the right is written that way as a decimal. They have exactly the same value. They're just written in two different ways. Okay, moving right along. So exciting, we are on to slide number 3. Yep, there's more. Pictures speak louder than words. Yes, it's true. No, you don't have to draw these silly little things. I did because I can just draw one, copy and paste, copy and paste. So I have 7 of those. Yes, we can call that 7/10. If you add them all up together, that's going to give you 7/10, right? So if I add them all together, and I'm going to add that part in, add, and you get 7/10. Well, Mr. C, that's quite a revelation. Oh, you've just begun to see the revelation, the revelatory nature, whatever. Oops, and I did write that. Okay, I forgot that I'd written that. So I added those to get 7/10, and in the same way, I would add all those fractions together to get 7/10 in fraction form. I'm going to have you stop right here and look at this and say, okay, there's equivalency. That's what the equal sign means right there. This is just two different ways to write the same value. If you get nothing else from this lesson today, that's it right there. Those two symbols, those two notations equal the same value. 7/10 as a decimal on the left, 7/10 is a fraction on the right. And yeah, I know, for some of you, you're thinking, yeah, Mr. C, I already get this. Guess what? You are maybe one of half of the class that got this at this point. I know. Some of you feel like this is too easy and you shouldn't linger on it. I vehemently disagree. This is the beginning of the decimal process. If you don't learn the way this is structured from the get-go, in other words, from ground zero, there will be points in where you learn this where you kind of memorize it and you paint yourself into a corner. What that means, there is peril in just trying to memorize this. Try to understand it. So 7/10 as a decimal is equal to 7/10 as a fraction. So why the 0, Mr. C? And not just because teacher says. The 0 represents something really significant. It's to show there is no whole number in that value. I know that may be really obvious, but when you're first learning decimals, believe it or not, This is the most frequently asked question that I've had over years and years of teaching this. Is, Mr. C, why do you write the 0? Why do I have to write the 0? I never do that otherwise. And you're right. It's because we are just now entering the world of decimals, and it's really important to make clear that there is no whole number in that answer, that fraction, 7/10, is less than 1 whole. That's why the 0 is there. It's also so you understand that decimal point is not just some random dot I made with my stylus on my iPad. Yes, I can do that. Last slide. We're 11 minutes in. It's all good. One last thing. And this is important because you will have to solve problems this way when you get into the homework set today. Okay. What that says is 3/10 of a centimeter plus how many centimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. It's really easy to get intimidated by this because you're thinking, whoa, 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 Mr. C, you added centimeter units. Why'd you do that? Well, because if I didn't, you would hit the homework set and say, oh my gosh, what does that CM stand for? I forget. It's been so long since we've done metric system. And, well, this is my little refresher for you. So 3/10 of a centimeter plus how many centimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. Think of it this way. You have a part plus a part, and that's going to equal a whole. That's all we're doing here. It's nothing more than that. Try to keep things simple in your head, and I think you'll be more successful. So, that being said, how much more? How much more what, Mr. C? How much more does it take to make 1 whole centimeter? 7/10. Well, that was easy. Yeah. But let me show you something here that's going to help you clarify. So, why? 3/10 plus what is equal to 1? And 3/10 the fraction plus what is equal to 1? Okay, the reason I'm showing you the fraction here is because we've done this before. In fact, I'm going to say everyone in the room knows the answer, knows what to replace that question mark with. And so you know that this is going to be, and I'm going to delete it, you know that this is going to be 7/10. Because 3/10 plus 7/10 is equal to 10/10, which is equal to, just so you know where I'm getting this, that 10/10 is equal to 1 whole. Great, Mr. C. So how's that going to work with the decimal? Well, I already know that this value right here is the same as this. Kind of a wonky 7, but let's just deal with it, okay? So 3/10 plus 7/10 is equal to 1. And you're going to say, in fact, excuse me, I can hear Emily thinking it right now. Yes, sometimes, Emily, I can hear what you think. Mr. C, you need to put the decimal point in, and you need to put a 0 in the fractions place. Mr. C, why'd you just do that? I just did that because we are working with a decimal problem. We have added our decimals, 3/10 and 7/10, to make 1. And we have to let other mathematicians know that we know that at this point there is no longer a decimal in this problem. That 10/10 is the same as 1 whole. Some people are going to say, well, Mr. C, can't you just say that 1.0? Oops. Mr. C is going to have to change that. Can't this just be 1.0, Mr. C? Can't this 1.0 can't you just drop the 0? I'll get to that later, but for right now, just understand that yes, you can, and I'm not going to tell you that right now. So I'm going to actually leave it right here. When I upload this, you'll actually see one little piece that's going to be added to it, the one that you just kind of got the sneak preview for. But I don't want to do it here because I'm going to have to move it, and that's a tedious process. We're about 15 minutes in. I know this is somewhat long in terms of lessons, but I think it's really important. Okay, you need to ask questions if this doesn't make sense. And I know that some of you are going to say, oh, Mr. C, I'm intimidated. I don't want to ask questions. All the other people will think I'm stupid. No, they won't. Learning is a process of failure. Overcoming that failure is the key to your success. And by failure, I don't mean, oh my gosh, you're such a loser. I mean failure in terms of, okay, it feels like a fail because you didn't understand it. That's not really a fail in the way that we say it sometimes. What it is it's just part of, okay, I don't really get this, so I have to ask a few more questions, and I strongly encourage you to do that. Anyway, I will upload this as a PDF file. You'll have that at your disposal, and please ask questions if you get stuck. Thank you very much for listening. Talk to you soon.